Hello, welcome to Chicas from China with Megan and Sam. We are so excited to bring this podcast to you. I've known Megan for a little bit over a year now, and we've had this idea on the back burner since Latin America, which was a little over a year ago. So, hi, Megan. Thank you so much. Yeah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, hello. Super excited to be able to start this project with you. I know we've been talking it for months, but I think that we have a lot of really cool ideas, really cool topics to talk about. So, yeah, let's get started with some about us, right? So, I get started. My name is Megan. I am a 30-something-year-old Chinese American. I grew up in California. I was originally born in China, immigrated to the US when I was 4 years old, originally lived in New York State for about a year before moving to California. So I basically spent my whole life in Northern California, and then I moved to the LA Orange County area probably about 15 years ago-ish, which has been a long time. Last year in 2023, I decided to quit my job. I used to work in corporate America in human resources and really wanted to travel the world. That was kind of my goal for a long time. So that's what I've been doing for the past year. And right now it's April 2024. It's coming up on my anniversary of leaving my job to travel.
Woo! How many
Did
countries did you visit last year?
Yeah, I went to 18 countries. I think it was like 50 something city, 50 more
Oh
cities
my gosh.
across Asia, Latin America, Europe, some states in the US. So it's
Have you
been a
seen those
wild
flight
ride.
apps? There's really cool flight apps where you can track how many flights you've been on and how many miles you have flown.
Oh no.
Okay, I'll have to find
What
the
is it
app.
called?
I don't remember. I'll find the
Okay,
app.
I'll Google it. Yeah, no, I definitely want to track it. That'd be super cool.
It was so funny. I was telling someone, yeah, my friend and I are trying to start this podcast called Chicas from China. And they're like, is she from Mexico? I'm like, she's literally from China. It's literally in
It's
the
called
name.
Chicas from China.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I speak Spanish at a conversational level. And when we were in Colombia, a lot of people are calling us China. And my friends, the other girls I was with who were also Asian, are like, what are they saying to us? I'm like, they're calling us China. And then Chica's from China just kind of evolved from there. But I started getting really sarcastic with my responses because asking, why do you speak English? Why don't you speak Mandarin? From my Uber driver is just kind of bizarre and it's none of your business, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. That's a little bit about me. So, Sam, do you want to go into your story?
Yeah, so I am also from China. I was born there, but I was adopted and I was raised in the Midwest in the USA in a primarily white area. About 3 years ago, I moved out to Los Angeles and I have loved it out here. I've loved the sunshine, I've loved the people I've met, and I've met a lot of really great connections and people that I don't think I would have gotten back in Indiana or the Midwest just because I felt like it was very monolithic. Is that the word I'm thinking of? I feel like in California, I don't stick out in any which way because everyone is unique. Everyone has their own unique background. Nobody fits in this mold. I'm an entrepreneur and I've been for the past 11 years. Everyone in LA is an entrepreneur. So I feel like I fit in very naturally out here. And I live really close to LAX, which has been nice. So I have been to 19 countries. 18 of those were in the past, I think, 2-ish years. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
So, how did we meet?
Megan posted on this Facebook group called Host a Sister, and she sounded really cool. And I'm like, hey, I'm gonna hit you up. Didn't you say that was your first time posting in a hot minute at that time?
Yeah, that was my first time posting at all. The premise of this group is it's an all women's group. I think there's about 600,000 members in there now. Again, it's a Facebook group called Host a Sister. And the idea is that you can find other women to host you when you're traveling. And so you just post where you're going, what dates, if you want to be a guest or if you are a host that can host somebody else and how many people you're traveling with. So whether it's you with a child or with a spouse, and then a little intro about yourself and why you're going to that place, what you like to do, whatever, right? And so that was my first time posting, and I was going to London in December, and I wanted to see if I could find someone to host me. Again, and then the idea is that it would be free hosting, right? If somebody had an extra couch or an extra bed that they can, it's like couch surfing, but specifically for women. I really liked it because it's a lot safer, right? I think as females, we do have that aspect of safety that we have to think about. You feel a little bit better when you're staying with another female.
I also like
So,
the group because you can see someone's Facebook profile and you can get a vibe for someone very quickly. Whereas with couch surfing, a lot of times profiles aren't filled out as much. But I can see your Facebook profile, I can see your Instagram and know instantly, okay, this is a real human being. Like she is like legitimate and yeah,
yeah.
probably sane to a certain degree, not gonna kidnap me
Yeah,
or
yeah.
anything. So yeah, I really liked like Hostess Sister for that. And the mods are really good, so they don't let spam in, and they're really good about booting people who are either scammers or yeah, all the weird situations.
Yeah, I think there were people who had want to start charging for hosting, and so that was something that they had nit in the bud pretty quickly.
Yeah. So I like the safety and security of that. I forgot that you were looking for a host in London. I just remember seeing that you were in the LA area and I'm like, "Oh, okay. I like want to make new travel friends here." I've hit up a lot of girls from the group and a lot of them I'm still friends with. But I remember meeting you in Long Beach. I had brought my dog, Champ, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, this girl's really cool. She has crazy travel stories, so I feel like we'll get along." And then the second time
Yeah.
we met, I was with my friend Chloe, and I was telling you about Colombia, and you're like, "Oh, okay, I'll go." And I'm like, "Wait, this girl's actually crazy."
Well, yeah, I remember that, like, initially you had responded to my post and we hung out, and then I saw that you posted again a second time looking for people to go to Colombia with you. And at that point, this is a couple months later, and I had met with another girl named Martina back in December, like very close to when I had first met you, and she was traveling to LA, so I hung out with her. And then when I saw your post, it was about traveling to Colombia, and then Martina was also going, and I was like, "Oh, how interesting!" Because I met both of you, but at that time, neither you hadn't met each other yet,
Yeah.
so you had only connected through this Facebook group, and then both of you guys were like, "Okay, let's go to Colombia," like with a stranger from the internet. And I was like, "Oh, cool! Like at least I know you guys. I met you guys. I know you guys are normal people, right? And are real." And so at the time, I was really hesitant about going because I was working full time and I felt bad about taking time off. But then I thought, like, why not? I have vacation time. Why would I not use it? And it would just be a week. And I had never thought about going to Latin America before. So it was a great opportunity. And I was like, screw it. And then so the third time we met was actually in Colombia.
Yeah.
That was pretty crazy.
It was crazy
But
that I didn't want to go to so originally I was going to be in Latin America and I learned Spanish through a Colombian program called Baselang and I couldn't go to Ecuador, Costa Rica, Guatemala and not go to Colombia. But I realized that there was a lot of dangers associated with it and I didn't really want to go solo in case anything would have happened. So that's why I reached out to host a sister and I said, "Hey, I want to go to Colombia with some other girls in case anything happens, we have each other to lean back on." Fortunately, nothing happened and we were really smart. But that's how I got connected with Martina. And then I saw that you guys were Facebook friends. And I'm like, "Hey, how do you know Megan? How do you know Martina?" And it was crazy that you guys had met up. Like the odds of that happening are wild.
yeah, it was pretty insane because she had come to LA in December for her birthday, and she's from Colorado. And so originally I was like, "Oh, I'll just hang out with you." She was dog sitting in Santa Monica at that point, I think. And then so I picked her up, we hung out for a day, and then we bonded over like boy issues. And then like the next time I saw her was in Colombia. So I don't know, it's just so interesting how the world works, but that was a really fun trip, and I'm glad we went on it.
And then our fourth friend, Claudia. So Claudia had been
Yeah, so
following me. We met on another Facebook group called Asian Wonder Woman, dedicated to Asian women that love travel. I really liked the nicheness of that group. But she had followed me on Instagram and we had been like Instagram friends, I guess, for a while. And she was replying to my story as I was replying to hers. And she later was talking about like she has a whole process of people that she is interested in traveling with, and we'll let her talk about that later. But I was one of the people that she was interested in traveling with, and she's like, I don't think I can go because of my schedule. And then a few days later, she messaged me and she's like, hey, actually, I want to go to Medellin with you guys. So she was only there for half of the trip, which is insane to me, but she bought the flight with points, and I met her for the first time in Medellin, which was insane that we all were like, yeah. So, how do you find good people to meet on the internet? Like, what is your criteria for, hey, I want to travel with you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think this is a pretty common question in terms of solo travel and a lot of females, right? Where you want to hang out with somebody, but you also want to make sure it's safe and that they're real, but you also have a good vibe. So it's kind of, I will say that it is pretty hard to tell just from like the internet, right? Because everybody kind of has a specific, thing that they show about themselves. But in general, because I am in a lot of female travel groups, and I know you are too, when I'm traveling and I want to meet up with people and I want to make friends, I'll post on these groups and then I'll see if anybody responds. And I kind of go from there. But sometimes someone else will post and then I will see their stuff and I'll respond to that too. And usually it's people who have like similar interests, like if they really like doing outdoorsy stuff, if they like hiking or food or music or shows, and I think in general, people who do travel and who travel solo are a specific type of person. And they like to be out of their comfort zone. They like to get out of their shell, right? Like they're comfortable traveling alone or even putting themselves out there by making a Facebook post and, just soliciting that type of interaction and response. And everybody that I've met through traveling through these groups have been amazing. Everyone's been really cool, very interesting people. They've all have very cool stories. And it's really inspiring. I've met several people who've also quit their jobs to travel, and I met them before I did that step, right? It really inspired me. It makes me feel like, okay, you can do this. This is something that people do. It's entirely possible. And, it's not so scary. So I think that's something cool. It's like a really big step to know that there's people out there doing this, and there's always going to be someone out there doing what you want to do.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a really good point. For me, because the group is so niche of women that are usually traveling solo, daring to get out of their comfort zone and go on this crazy expedition, that's already like a very niche thing. And we already have a lot in common based on that. And having that strength and that courage to put yourself out there, like that's the type of energy I want to attract. I don't think I've met anyone I didn't like from Host a Sister, actually, now that you mention it. Everyone I've met on there has been amazing. And even some of my best friends have come from that group, which is insane. Like, yeah, it just attracts like such a
Yeah.
good group of women, and I think that they have kept it growing at a good pace to make sure that the community is still there and like the heart of the mission is still there.
Yeah, totally. It's crazy because when I first joined, like maybe 2 years ago, there were 400,000 members in that
Oh
group.
wow.
And now I checked and it's like 600,000, which is like 200,000 people in 2 years. But I
So
recommend it to everybody. Like my sister's on it, her friends are on it,
yeah,
I
so
love Facebook
before
groups.
the Colombia trip, I was in Costa Rica 2 weeks before that, and I'd also met those girls off of Hostess Sister, and we had met up separately in New York
Oh,
and
cool.
Vegas before we had gone on that trip. But I had done almost like a vibe check with them because I think it's important when you travel, not only that your budget's aligned, but also that your travel styles align. And what I really appreciated about these girls was because they're extremely intelligent, independent, and all, we didn't have to be doing the exact same thing every single day. I remember being in Colombia and somebody was mad about someone in their group because they're like, "Oh yeah, we missed XYZ because Jerry wanted to sleep in." I'm like, "I would have left Jerry. Like, this is great, but I want to do this thing.
Yeah.
There's no offense to it." Even in Colombia, one member of our group wanted to stay out late and a couple of us wanted to get breakfast early in the morning, and that's what we did. There was nothing, I'm not mad at you. I just want to do different things than you. So I really liked that flexibility of
Yeah.
traveling. And even when I traveled throughout Asia for quite a bit with Claudia, and we never really got sick of each other because we did different things when we wanted to, or if we needed time alone, we just did our own thing alone. It's not like we needed to be joined at the hip or anything.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think one of the things that you can use to gauge that is maybe if the other person doesn't really like specific things that they want to do, right? And they'll be like, okay, let me just like tag on, like, I'll do whatever you want to do. I've had that before where someone's reached out to me after one of my posts in the group and they're like, oh, I want to go on holiday, but I don't really know where to go or like what to do. Can I just join you? And to me, unfortunately, that was kind of a red flag because that means I would have to stick with the person, which is, to some people it's fine, right? But like, there's always that element of having to compromise with somebody, having to, be on their schedule, maybe doing things that they may want to do that you may not want to do, right? Like you could possibly not see eye to eye on certain things. Like you said, the beauty of being able to find good travel partners is that you can do things on your own if you want to, or you can come together and do things together if that's the plan, right? And that there's no hard feelings about it, that we all understand that that's just the way it is. And that's cool.
Yeah, I think it was in Mexico City or Belize. I think we did pretty much everything together, but that's just because it fit with what we wanted to do. Our travels aligned. Like, I don't have any issues with traveling with other people. It's just I like that ability, and I like I think it's more not even the ability. I think it's a mindset thing. I love the mindset of saying, "Hey, if I want to do this, I'm not going to wait around for you. I'm going to go do it." I think that that for me is like the biggest thing is the mindset of the person I'm with. We can do everything
Yeah.
together, but you have to have that mindset of being okay with doing something on your own if I don't want to go bungee jumping or something.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think it's important to be independent
Yeah.
is the main thing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, with Costa Rica, everyone was on different budgets. So for a couple of the girls, it was their vacation. And so obviously, girl, you need to splurge. But for me, this was one of like 4 or 5 trips. So I wanted to save more money. And there's some things I
Yeah.
just don't have any interest in, including anything with extreme heights, jumping out of things, that type of thing. So I'll always feel free to, you can go without me. I'll watch and be
Yeah.
a supportive friend from the sidelines.
Yeah, totally.
Have you ever met up with
Yeah.
anyone crazy online?
No, I have not met up with anybody who's crazy. I think everyone's been pretty chill
Okay.
in terms of traveling and stuff.
I haven't
Um,
met up with anyone that was one girl I met up with. I really liked her. She told me of a story of a girl she met up with. The night ended in a DUI and her having to go get the dog from the pound. So that was a crazy story, but I've never had anything like that.
yeah, I've never experienced anything like that personally, but I've heard stories from other people that they've experienced things that were crazy. So for example, I in 2019, before the pandemic, I was in New Zealand with my family. We had rented a camper van for 2 weeks and we're driving around South Island. And I guess hitchhiking is a thing in New Zealand. It's very safe. If you haven't been to New Zealand, highly recommend it. It's a gorgeous country. It's very, very safe. And the people are friendly, it's chill, the weather's nice. But anyways, so at one point we were passing by all these hitchhikers, right? And I was one driving and I had asked my mom, my sister, hey, do you guys mind if we pick up a hitchhiker? And they were like, no, you cannot pick up a hitchhiker. And I was like, oh, okay. Because most of them were men on the side of the road. And then at one point I saw this Asian girl standing on set, like very young. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna pick her up. So we pull over right away. And so she like knows that I'm like pulling over for her. And it's funny because I was driving, we make eye contact, and then she sticks her thumb out because she didn't have her thumb out originally. So she like found me, right, basically. And then we drive her probably like an hour and a half north of where we're going. And she starts telling us these crazy stories. And she was 20 years old at the time, going to university. And she told me that when she was 18 and graduated high school, she spent a year backpacking through Europe on her own with a tent. And she was hitchhiking most of the time. And so I think one of the crazy stories she told me was she had pitched a tent on the side of the road and she was sleeping there for the night. And in the middle of the night, this random man comes in with like slices a hole in her tent. Like this is, like safety is pretty important. Comes into her tent, takes off his shoes, and then demands money from her. And she's like, I don't have any money. I'm literally sleeping in a tent. Why would you come in here asking me for money? And then she takes out her phone and she's calling or texting or something. And the man like grabs her phone and runs off, leaving his shoes in her tent, which is so crazy, right? And she's
How did
like,
your shoes even come off in this scenario? Like, What in the
And then
world?
it's so weird, right? So like he just like took off my shoes and left them, runs away. And then now she's like, what am I going to do with this hole in my tent and this man's shoes? And so the next morning, she is still hitchhiking, right? She gets picked up by a woman who she tells a story to. And then the woman feels so bad for her, right? This like young Asian girl, a teenager really. And I don't remember what country she's in, but the woman apparently lives at or owns this resort, drives her to this resort, lets her stay for as long as she wants with like free room service. There's a pool, everything, right? All amenities. And so I think she stays probably 4 or 5 days because she doesn't want to overstay her welcome. It's like this gorgeous gated resort. And that just kind of shows that karma is real, right? The universe balances itself out. You experience this crazy thing where this man comes and like, like puts you in danger. And then the next morning, a woman picks you up and you get to stay in this beautiful resort for a couple of days, you know? And I just think that's so interesting that that's happened. It's, not my story, but yeah, there's definitely some crazy travel stories.
To me, the craziest part about that story isn't necessarily like it's the fact that she was hitchhiking and then the danger came some random night from some random, I'm gonna say idiot because he left his shoes there and was robbing someone on the side of the road who's probably staying there because they have no money.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just like I don't know. That story is really bizarre to me, but in a very ironic and hilarious way. I'm sure she didn't think it was hilarious when she was going through it, but I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. She's had some other really crazy travel stories. Maybe we can have her on one of these days. Like I'll reach out to her. We're Facebook friends.
Wait, what are your thoughts on hitchhiking?
I think it depends. So you and I hitchhiked in Belize, and I felt like I was comfortable doing that because
It was a golf cart.
we were kind of on an island. It was golf carts, right? If there's any danger, we just like jump off on the side of the road. So I felt more comfortable, and it was the two of us.
Yeah.
So, and it was during the day.
But our driver
Um,
was definitely drunk or high or both or
we had a couple of drivers, right? So like
the last one.
um yeah, so Samantha and I were in San Pedro and Belize, and our goal was to get to this beach called Secret Beach on the other side of the island. And if you drove, it would have been an hour drive. No, 30 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
But like it would have been a long walk. So I was like, okay, let's go hitchhiking. It took us about an hour to get there. We hitchhiked 4 rides there and 2 rides on the way back. And I thought it was really fun. It was both of our times hitchhiking. But yeah, on the way there, I think we had like two families come pick us up separately. And then the other two times were like two guys. On the way back, it was this man who was working at a bar or something. And then he had his friend also give us a ride back for the second half. And then they were high or like drinking or something. I think they had definitely like drank, and
At
then we're
the
also
very least.
driving this golf cart. And then we're like, "Are
And we
you guys
stopped for a
okay?"
beer or
Just
something
driving.
several times. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and we're like, "Okay, maybe it's a thing. I don't know."
I'm like, is
I mean,
DUI a thing in
overall,
Belize on this random island?
I guess not. I don't know. Golf carts, maybe. Maybe it's not a real DUI.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And then I hitchhiked later to Malaysia. I remembered the tips of the camper story of the girl. I was basically stranded without any ringgit, the Malaysian currency. My debit cards weren't working, and it was like a 2 mile, I think, walk in Cameron Highlands. We're in the middle of nowhere, and Uber's not working. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to walk with my backpack on. It's starting to get dark. There's only one road. So if someone's gonna kidnap me, like I don't know. I was weighing all my options and I was going through it. And then I ended up swallowing my pride and sticking my thumb out in the middle of the road. And I ended up getting where I needed to go. And then I ended up having to hitchhike back down because I needed to go get a motorcycle, which was a whole other story. And I needed to try other ATMs. But on the way down, it was crazy. I had met this Malaysian woman. She was with her partner and she'd actually gone to school in Ohio, which is really close to where I grew up, Indiana, and she spoke perfect English. And at this like point, like I didn't know anyone that like spoke English there. Everyone spoke Malay. Some people spoke Mandarin, but I don't speak Mandarin. It was crazy to hear English, and then the fact that she had gone to school in Ohio was wild to me. But I think, yeah,
In
I've changed my
Malaysia.
views on hitchhiking since meeting ambitious people like Megan.
It's interesting because usually when I talk to people about hitchhiking and tell a story about the girl in New Zealand, they were like, "Was she smelly? Like, was she dirty?" And usually I'm like, oh, would you, like asking random people, would you pick up a hitchhiker? And they're like, oh, well, maybe if they're not dirty or smelly. But I think that's just the stereotype, right? Because not every, I mean, we were not dirty or smelly. Like the girl that I picked up was not. I think it's just like people think that hitchhikers are just bums, like homeless
Yeah.
people on the road. And that's not really the case, right? I think they're just normal people. And you may have a weirdo here and there. I don't know. I haven't experienced that, but just be open-minded. There's like all sorts of people and, all sorts of situations.
Yeah, and I think it's really about like being aware of it and also I feel like it's one thing for you to be looking out for other people, but if they're actively looking to pick up people, that's a huge red flag to me. I don't know, because I feel like it's also a situational
Yeah.
thing, like really trusting your gut.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And one of the things that the girl had taught us about hitchhiking was really to like look at a driver first, right? It's not just about like, oh, you can pick up any, like get picked up by anybody. Maybe if you're desperate, sure. But I think it's smarter if you're standing there, you're watching the traffic coming towards you, and then looking at the drivers and seeing who's driving, who's in the passenger seat, right? Is it like a single person? Is it like a couple? Maybe a family, and then putting your thumb out there. So it's almost like you're kind of gauging to see if they will pick you up because you're comfortable with them. But if you're not comfortable with that person, then you don't have to even signal that you need a ride.
Yeah.
All right, what's your favorite travel experience so far?
I have two. So I went to Iceland in 2022 with two girls. One of them was a friend, and one of them was the friend of her. So before going on this trip, I had watched this motivational video about pushing past your limits and doing things that scare you. And this girl was talking about her experience running a marathon. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't really run. I don't exercise at all. So I'm going to go run 5 miles. And I usually run in a rectangular pattern so I can always stop. But I'm like, oh no, that's for babies. I am going to run in a straight line. So there is no other option but to go back and set straight line. Well, I ended up injuring my knee. And then a few days later, through a entirely separate incident, I ended up spraining my ankle. And the 2 days afterward, I ended up boarding on a plane to Iceland. But throughout that time, I had a really great experience. And then I went ice climbing on said sprained ankle. And I physically wanted to die. I was in so much pain. The glacier that we were hiking before we had gone ice climbing was known for people spraining their ankles because you're wearing crampons. Crampons, is that what they're called?
Yeah, the grandmas.
Yeah. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I definitely signed a waiver saying I am not wearing an ankle brace, which I thought was extremely specific. If you're listening, Iceland people, I'm sorry for lying on my waiver. But yeah, so like ice climbing was such a surreal experience, and I'm glad I did that despite all the physical challenges. I don't recommend that, and I think you should make smarter decisions than me. But that was an amazing experience that I'm really glad I did. It was so exhilarating. At the time, I was with a female guide and two other girls around my age. So we just had this like feminine powered energy, which I was not expecting. This was just a general tour group, but it was so cool to have like an all female group, and we got to explore this underground tunnel type ice cave. They had just discovered it a few days ago, so we were one of the very first people to go in and see it. I have this most like a gorgeous shot in there of us like through this like glacier and all of that. That was one of them. And the second one is in Maui, Hawaii, on Haleakala. Is that what the national park is called? I can't pronounce it.
I'm not
It's
sure.
Haleakala. Yeah, but I was with a group of adoptees. Like I mentioned, I'm adopted from China, and I was with two other adoptees, and one of them, their fiance as of that trip, and now they're married. But we were watching sunset. It was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. I started crying because it was so beautiful, and it was the last day of our trip, and it was one of those moments that I just didn't want to end. With both of those people, I had only met them once in person previously, but with Maya in particular, I'm like, oh my gosh, this girl is my twin. We have so much in common. Everything from superficial things, like at the time we met, both of our hair was purple, down to the fact we both have severe ADHD and are horrible drivers. And so we just connected on all of these things on such this level. And I just was facing that realization that like it's gonna end and tomorrow we all have to go home. And so I just remember like, oh my gosh, I hate the fact that I feel this way. I hate the fact that I'm turning this a happy moment to something sad. But for me, that was like one of my favorite travel moments, like on that volcano, freezing our buns off because we were not prepared and we did not pack adequately. But just seeing this like incredible sunset, like thousands of feet above like sea level. Yeah, so it was crazy. Like you felt like you were walking on clouds because the clouds were so up, like were so high. And then like, I don't know, it was just like the most magical, surreal experience ever.
That sounds awesome.
What about
That's
you?
amazing. I mean, for my travel story, oh my gosh, I it's hard to say because every experience is so different. I mean, I do have a couple too. I really love my experience going to New Zealand and staying in a camper van for 2 weeks with my mom and my sister. And we had never, stayed in a camper van before. You drive on the other side of the road in New Zealand compared to the US. So we had to get used to that. And I was the one driving the majority of the time. And, you're just kind of in close quarters all the time, kind of having to, when you're with your family, you kind of have to make that adjustment. But it was a blast because it was super safe. We're all experiencing the country for the first time. It's a very unique experience to be in a, camper van life, I guess. So that's one.
Did you have a singular moment in the camper van that you were like, oh my God, like this is amazing?
I do actually. So when we were driving to Milford Sound, because we were in the South Island of New Zealand, Milford Sound is kind of the western coast. And you drive in, and it's just a one-way road, and there's these waterfalls that are like coming down on both sides of you, and you feel like you're in Middle Earth in from Lord of the Rings. It's insane because you like we're driving in, it was like the mist, like magical mist coming towards you, and like a bajillion waterfalls just coming down from all angles. And I was like, where are we? This is crazy. I feel like I'm in a different world. And it was something that I didn't expect because I didn't do that much research on Milford Sound, only that it's something that we should do and go and see. And so it's a lot of like driving in, but then once we get there, it was like there's only one camper van site, I think a couple of hotels. And then we were really lucky because it had been booked out. It's like booked out for months. And then I kept checking it, and then I guess somebody canceled. And so there's one spot, and we got the one spot and we're able to stay there for the night. And when you stay there, it's like forest everywhere. And it's a mist, and it was just amazing. You just have to go experience it. So that was definitely a point that was like wow for me. Another experience I think was when you and I went to Colombia. That was
Mhm.
one of my favorite experiences. I think because it was that point in my life. And I had just gone out of a really long-term relationship. I hadn't really traveled much with my friends, mostly with my family. And then for me, it was more of a spontaneous trip where I used to be a lot more careful, more calculated, plan things in advance. But this one, I was like, oh, screw it, like I'll go. Latin America was never on my list, so I didn't do much planning. I didn't know what to expect, right? And so it was kind of just like, okay, whatever, like, well, we'll just do whatever. And it ended up being really fun. All of it, like, you and I went with two other girls, right? Martina and Claudia, that we talked about before. And all of us were really chill, really independent. We like went out, we went to go do tours, we rented a moped and like
Yeah.
drove, like hours, and that's a separate story. But it was amazing. I feel like everything was kind of spur of the moment. We got pedicures and facials, and it was
Oh yeah.
amazing. So I think it was like a combination of the experience, right? The people, obviously, the situation for me personally at that point in my life, and just being in a different country. So yeah.
So Megan's that friend. You guys are like, hey, do you guys want to try XYZ? And she's like, oh, I actually already have my license for that. I'm like, what are you talking about? So yeah, like the riding the moped or motorcycle or whatever to Guatape was one of my favorite experiences too. Oh my gosh. That was so much fun. I was sore for a long time afterward, but it was so exhilarating.
Yeah. Yeah, so I have my motorcycle license, so I've been riding for years. And Sam really wanted to rent a bike and ride at one point. And so we're like, okay, cool. So we do that. We are Medellin, we ride about 2 hours outside of Medellin to Guatape, which is a tourist area. And then we ride back. So it's a day thing that we do.
And
But
then we got kind of
I
lost on the ride there.
yeah, that was kind of my fault. But I had well, I set my Google Maps to like no toll roads, right? So it took us to this winding back mountainous trail instead of the highway. And so it took us like 3 hours, I think, instead of like the 2 hours, 1.5 maybe. Anyways, it took us
Yeah.
a long time, but we got there.
Yeah, and we like I just remember in that moment. So we were on this hill and we knew we weren't both going to be able to get up on this hill. So one of us would have to like get off and walk, but this is a steep like I swear it was like 45-degree angle hill. And so this guy tried to put me back on his. So he stopped and he's like, "Do you guys need help?" And we're like, "Yes, we do." He didn't speak English, but I'm like, "Okay, yeah, like necesito ayuda." But I just remember he tried to put me on his and it wasn't working. It was just too steep. Two people were not going to fit on this. And I just remember him looking at me and doing like this with his fingers and just like the walking symbol. And I just remember looking back because I'm like so tired. I'm like, me walk. And he's like, and he just speeds off in the distance. I'm like, well, okay, this was unfortunate. But yeah, I just remember that moment.
So
I was not prepared
funny.
to hike. So I was like in this like little outfit. I was not prepared for this like hike. I was just preparing to like take cute pictures in Guatape. But apparently I was like
Yeah.
freaking hiking.
That was really funny because Sam and I got on the off the bike, so I was riding it, and then it was on the hill, so I had to go up to a flat area where I could stop. So I went up, stopped, and I was waiting for the guys to come up with Sam, and they didn't come. And after a while, like 5 or 10 minutes, I was like, "What's going on?" And finally, I see the guy coming up by himself, and he stops, and I don't speak Spanish, he doesn't speak English, and he's like gesturing, like pointing behind him with this like two-finger walking motion. And I was like, huh? Oh, she's walking? Okay. And then he speeds off. And I was like, all right. So then I like go walk down the hill a little bit and then I ran into Sam and then we kind of like walked
And
the
then
rest of the
Sam
distance. But that was
clapped.
so funny.
Just like the motion of the walking, because I like it's one of those things that you feel like you know it's gonna happen, but you're just in so denial about it. Because I'm like, I do not want to walk up this stupid hill. It's so steep, it's so tall, but I did it.
But we got there and it was
We
great.
did. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
we
and it
were
was a great
really worried about
story.
coming back because we're like, this is all fine and dandy, but coming back in the dark on this road, like we're gonna die or something. We're gonna crash. But fortunately, we learned about the highway and we learned that there was a much quicker way to visit.
Yeah.
It was funny as we were talking to our friend
Crazy.
Martina and a guy that she was with. He's like, "Well, didn't you take the freeway?" We're like, "What freeway? What are you talking about?"
Yeah. Yeah, no. So that was a lesson, but it was fun. Well, thank you everybody for listening to our first episode of our new podcast, Chicas from China. It's been amazing catching up with you, Sam, and I always love talking to you, and I'm really excited to continue our series. We have a ton of interesting topics to cover, including safety, more fun travel stories, dating while traveling. We're going to have some special guests on that can talk about their experiences abroad, maybe working, teaching, living abroad. So definitely stay tuned and we will talk to you next time.
Adios.